Sometime last cycle, I received a document from Earth. It was not a request for help. It was not a question. It was a report, a formal, official report filed by human civilization, titled, and I am reading this exactly as written, Summary of Progress Achieved, Industrial Era to Present. 42 pages, charts, graphs, a table of contents. Humans submitted a progress report to the universe, and apparently nobody on Earth thought this was unusual. I read it, I went through every claim, I checked the numbers, and what I found was not fraud exactly. The numbers are technically accurate. The problem is the column they forgot to fill in. Every entry had a gains column. None of them had a costs column. And when you add the costs, which I did because that is my job, the report looks considerably different. This is what I want to talk about today. Not whether humans have achieved things, they have. Remarkable things, genuinely. The question is whether what they gained and what they lost ended up in the same direction. Before we get into the receipts, subscribe if you enjoy watching someone audit a civilization from a research station. Like this video if you've ever looked at the modern world and thought, this cannot be what we were working toward. And comment, what so-called progress do you think made things quietly worse? I want to build a list. Let me start with time, the labor-saving device. For most of human history, the workday was defined by daylight and physical capacity. You worked until it was dark or until your body gave out, whichever came first. Agriculture changed this somewhat. The Industrial Revolution changed it dramatically. Machines could now do in an hour what took a human a week. The promise was obvious, and it was stated explicitly. Technology will give you time back, leisure, rest, freedom from toil. So here is what happened to the average American work week. In 1900, it was approximately 60 hours. After decades of labor rights movements, machinery, automation, and productivity revolutions, it dropped to about 47 hours by the 1970s. Progress. Measurable, real progress. Then something interesting happened. The hours stopped dropping. By 2024, the average American was working 47 hours per week, identical to 1970, despite a century of additional automation, computing, artificial intelligence, and every productivity tool humanity has invented in that period. The machines did not give the time back. Someone else took it. On my planet, when a labor-saving device saves labor, the labor is actually saved. I realize this may sound basic, but somewhere in the translation from "this machine can do your work faster" to "this machine will do your work faster so you can rest," the second half disappeared. What replaced it was, "this machine can do your work faster so you can do more work." This is the first entry in the costs column. Now, communication, the connection revolution. Humans have built, in approximately 30 years, the most sophisticated communication infrastructure in the history of any species I have studied. You can reach any human on Earth within seconds. You can speak to someone you have never met, across 12 time zones in real time for free, while also watching a video, reading a document, and ordering dinner. From a device that fits in your pocket. The engineering is extraordinary. The ambition was beautiful. The World Happiness Report 2025 found that happiness levels declined in 58% of countries over the past decade, the exact decade during which global connectivity reached its peak. The United States, a country that spent this period building and operating the world's dominant social networks, ranked 24th in global happiness. Americans under 30 ranked 62nd. The most connected generation in human history is also, by measurable data, one of the loneliest. This is not a coincidence. This is a design outcome that wasn't in the original plan. The problem is that connection and communication are not the same thing. Humans built an extraordinary machine for communication and called it a connection tool. But what the research now shows, clearly, repeatedly, across countries, is that the depth of a relationship matters far more to happiness than the volume of it. A handful of people who genuinely know you outperforms hundreds of digital contacts every time. And the time spent maintaining those hundreds of digital contacts is time subtracted from the few who would actually matter. The infrastructure was built for quantity. Happiness runs on quality. Nobody filled in that column. Now, I want to talk about something humans are particularly proud of: economic growth. Global GDP has grown approximately tenfold since 1950. Life expectancy has increased by roughly 25 years in that period. Child mortality has collapsed. Famine, while not eliminated, is now largely a political failure rather than an agricultural one. These are not small things, these are genuine historic achievements that have saved hundreds of millions of lives. I want to be clear that I am not dismissing them. But there is a finding in economics called the Easterlin paradox, named after the researcher who noticed in the 1970s that beyond a certain income threshold, additional wealth no longer tracks with additional happiness. The data since then has only reinforced this. A study often cited in this field found that emotional well-being rises with income, but only up to a point. After that point, the curve flattens, the economy keeps growing, the happiness does not follow. Here is what is interesting about this finding. It was published in 1974, 50 years ago. The evidence has been replicated dozens of times, and in those 50 years, the primary organizing principle of most human societies has remained: grow the economy. Measure success in GDP. Optimize for output. The metric and the goal became the same thing, and the actual goal, which was presumably the well-being of the people inside the economy, quietly dropped to a secondary concern, then a tertiary one, then a column that doesn't get filled in. I have checked this, the column is still empty. Here is the one that I find most quietly devastating. Humans invented agriculture about 12,000 years ago. The standard historical framing is that this was the turning point, the moment civilization became possible. And in one sense, that is true. Agriculture enabled population growth, specialization, cities, writing, science, and everything that followed, the foundation of the Progress Report. What the Progress Report does not mention is what happened to the individual humans who made the transition. Skeletal analysis of populations before and after the agricultural revolution shows that the first farmers were shorter than hunter-gatherers, had more signs of malnutrition, more dental disease, more evidence of chronic illness, and shorter lifespans on average. They worked more hours. They ate less varied diets. They were more vulnerable to famine because their entire survival depended on one or two crops rather than hundreds of food sources. Agriculture was worse for most of the individuals who lived through it. It was better for the group long term. The civilization that agriculture made possible eventually produced medicine, sanitation, and nutrition science that corrected many of these problems centuries later. But the people who actually made the transition, who gave up the variety and mobility of foraging for the labor and fragility of farming, did not see those benefits. They paid a cost that a future generation cashed. Humans do this repeatedly. Progress extracts from the present to invest in the future, and the extraction is real, but the investment is framed as achievement. The people paying the cost and the people receiving the benefit are rarely the same people. This is not in the progress report. I'm not arguing that humans should have just stayed in caves. The progress is real. Life is materially better on almost every measurable physical dimension than it was 200 years ago. The child mortality number alone, the sheer number of children who are alive today who would not have been, makes the ledger clearly positive when measured in lives. But I think the question the title asks, is it progress, cannot be answered with just the gains column. Progress toward what? Measured how? For whom? Over what timeline? These are not rhetorical questions. They are accounting questions. And a complete ledger would show that alongside every genuine advancement, something else moved in the opposite direction, usually quietly, usually uncounted, usually carried by people who had the least say in the decision. The progress report humans submitted was 42 pages of gains. The costs column was blank. Not because the costs don't exist, they clearly do. They show up in the happiness data and the loneliness data and the working hours data and the agricultural archaeology data and the environmental data. They exist, they just weren't counted. On my planet, we learned a long time ago that a report with only one column is not a report. It is a pitch. I will keep reading. There are 38 more planets to audit before this assignment is done, and so far Earth is the only one that submitted paperwork. I'll be honest, I didn't expect that.